Hey guys, welcome back. We took a look at just some of the scenery, the streets, and some of the buildings the other day in Wells, England. And somebody was saying that I needed to take a look at the Wells Cathedral. It was a little difficult to find some like videos that weren't short or like a minute long or like just somebody kind of traveling around, just something that was actually focused on the cathedral. um so hopefully this one works out, but it is from Smart History. Title is just Wells Cathedral. Hoping it does maybe a little bit of history based on the fact it says it's history. And we can get a little bit better look at the cathedral itself. But I will link this video in the description, along with a link over to Patreon and a link of how you can support the channel here on YouTube by becoming a member or with a one-time donation. For all paid members, now we have new emotes, and they're pretty awesome. Designed them myself. I like them. I'm a little biased, but you can go check them out yourself. But yeah, let's just go ahead and jump right into this. I'm excited to see this cathedral. This town is absolutely mind-blowingly gorgeous and so rich in history and architecture. I mean, just look at this. Look at this. This is wild.
The small town of Wells in southwest England, looking at the Cathedral of St. Andrew, more commonly known as Wells Cathedral.
And for many people, the most spectacular part of Wells Cathedral is the west front.
It's extremely unusual for
Wow,
an
look
English
at
cathedral to
that.
have this much figural sculpture.
We're used to having a large amount of figural sculptures on the facade of French Gothic churches, and the jambs, in the trumeau, in the tympana, in the archivolts. But here, the doorways are quite small, and that is not the main location for the sculpture. Sculpture occupies these canopied niches across the facade.
The result is this broad, flat plain with lots of sculptures interrupted by 6 deeply protruding buttresses that have lots of sculptural niches on either side.
And in fact, the sculpture continues around the north and south sides of the building. This broad screen on the west facade.
When I was looking at this building before and any of the other videos, even the beginning of this one before they pointed out, I didn't even notice. I was just like, I don't know. I was just looking at. I could, see the like that it was detailed, but it didn't even like register in my mind that these were actual sculptures of like people and stuff, which is super amazing. Uh, it just blows my mind that this stuff exists and it's still there. It just blows my mind.
Is very typical of English Gothic churches, but it's the amount of sculpture that's unusual.
And it really is broad. In fact, it's approximately twice as wide as it is tall, if you don't count the towers.
In many ways, this resembles a choir screen. Now, a choir screen separated the east and west ends of the church and acted as a boundary, but also as a backdrop for liturgical events relating to the services in the church.
We think that this functioned as a decorative and instructive backdrop for important feast days, especially around Easter.
Palm Sunday especially, there was a procession that took place, and the church would have been decorated with banners. We also have to remember that this facade was brightly painted, parts of it were gilded, and the best part, there was music coming from the church facade itself.
If you look very closely, the 4 lower quatrefoils, on either side of where the sculpture would have been, there are holes, and through those holes, singers' voices could be heard. Those singers stood in a hidden gallery within the building.
And there was a second gallery even higher up where trumpeters played.
And so, with its brightly painted facade, with its banners,
Wow.
and with its music, the church would have come alive. In typically English fashion, it's begun to rain, so let's go inside.
Do they still do that? Like, I feel like if they exist, like, you should absolutely still do that. I mean, at least Easter, Christmas, at least once or twice a year. I think that is incredible. That is amazing to me. I
We've
mean,
walked out
who
of
would
the
have thought?
increasingly heavy rain into the cathedral and into the nave.
So we have a typical three-part Gothic elevation with a nave arcade with pointed arches.
And these particular arches are quite narrow.
But they are also deep in that way that English Gothic architecture is. We have a series of rolled moldings that give us a sense of the depth of the wall.
And then above that, one of the most unique characteristics of the nave elevation, that is the gallery. This is a series of framed arches that are openings into a walkway. But here, there is such an emphasis on the rolled molding that the arches have narrowed to mere slits. And when you look at them obliquely, the openings disappear entirely.
But we see that characteristically English interest in decoration. Above those narrow arched openings, we see carvings of foliage, animals, and then heads between the arches.
And we have corbels from which spring four-part ribbed groin vaults.
But even in those corbels, we see foliage.
Wait a minute, wait a second. That is incredible. On the ceiling, that is I've never seen that. I mean, I've seen like murals and stuff, but I've never seen anything like this on a church ceiling. That's incredible.
Groin vaults.
But even in those corbels, we see foliage.
And then also, very typical of early English Gothic, at the clear story, we see an additional passageway. There's a real effort to again emphasize the thickness of the wall.
Because the vault ribs spring from those corbels and not the compound piers below, when we look at the nave, there's not an emphasis on the vertical as much as there is an emphasis on the horizontal, leading us toward the east end of the church. And this is, again, typically English Gothic.
And the great sense of density at the gallery level further disassociates
Look at that
the nave
ceiling.
arcade from the gallery and again from the clear story.
So we have a sense of three separate horizontal bands, and we lose that sense of the vertical segmentation of space that we typically see in French Gothic churches.
But before we move past the nave, we have to address the single most unique, most powerful architectural element within the entire cathedral, what are known
It's
as
incredible.
scissor arches.
And we find these at all
Oh.
four entrances to the crossing.
Now, this was not originally intended when the church was first laid out.
It was added after when they were building the tower, and they realized that the tower was putting such great weight on the crossing underneath, and they needed something else to help support that weight.
Clearly, these are structural, but they're also absolutely
Yeah.
sculptural. They give a sense of dynamism to the space.
The two oculi on either side of each of these strainer arches look like eyes. So as I look
So it says that this Wells Cathedral it begun in 1175. It amazes me, and I know there are structures obviously that exist well before that even scholars today struggle to figure out how they did it. But like just at that time, how not even just like how intelligent people were. Because I'm not saying people today are smarter. I think we know, in theory, we know a little bit more. We've gained knowledge since then. Although, I would argue that people are dumber in a lot of ways. Like, I feel like people valued books and really, really learning back then, and nowadays people just stare at their phone all day and have absolutely no attention span. But like, just how on earth did they do that? It just blows my mind how they did this stuff. And it's not even like, okay, well, structurally we need to support this, and so we're gonna we're just gonna put some an archway or something up. Like, it wasn't even that. They were like, let's make it freaking awesome and incredible and like almost impossibly difficult on ourselves, but like it just visually amazing, like, so that it's not just structural, like they said, that it's visually appealing. And
We're at the East End. I feel like I'm being peered
awe-inducing.
back at. It's uncanny.
The architect found a powerful but poetic solution to a structural problem. And this is an important reminder that the Gothic was still in its infancy, that this was still very much a time of experimentation.
And we can see clearly, too, that this was a church, like most Gothic churches, that was built in stages. And as we look through that scissor arch, we see these lovely fan vaults that date to the later perpendicular period.
This particular church was built in several campaigns over 3 centuries.
Holy
And it's a wonderful-
smokes. Look at these windows. Some of you guys know this. I've said it before. I grew up Catholic, and I went to Catholic school my entire life. And so we used to have to go to church. I mean, from kindergarten until I graduated high school, we would have to go to church at least once a week during school. And I think it was usually like Wednesday mornings or something. And I was even an altar girl when I was young. But, a lot of times, you're tired. You'd end up going like in the morning right after you got there. So I think for me, and I think a lot of other kids with short attention spans are standing there just trying to stay awake. And so what I would do was just kind of stare at on the side walls of the church. There were the stained glass windows, and the ones in our church represented the Lord, I'm not religious, wasn't really then, and I'm certainly not now. So it's now, but yeah, okay, it was the Stations of the Cross. I remember. It was the Stations of the Cross. So every window represented one. And I remember just during the masses that's kind of what I would busy myself with, was looking at just admiring the stained glass and just the architecture of the building and the archways and I mean, I think churches, even though I'm not religious, I think churches are absolutely gorgeous. I mean, obviously, I don't know what denomination this church goes for, but obviously at that time, churches wielded a lot of power and had a lot of money. And the Catholic Church also a lot of money. So, I feel like they really did a good job of putting it into some of these structures that have just really held the test of time and just are pretty. They're just pretty. Even if you're not religious, you can just really admire the building and the beauty of it.
A patchwork of different styles.
What I notice when I look up at the capitals is that sometimes I see foliage, but often also figures, and sometimes quite amusing ones. One of the most famous figures seems to be suffering from a toothache.
Art historians have likened this to illuminated manuscripts, where scribes would sometimes draw little vignettes in the margins that were fanciful and had little to do with the main body of text. We've walked up this gloriously beautiful set of 13th century stairs that were worn by generations of men who would come to a large room known as a chapter house for a morning meeting.
And what we see here is typically English decorated Gothic, especially when we look.
Can you imagine trying to climb those steps after like a good amount of drinks? You'd be on the floor.
At the vaulting.
The center shaft radiates upward, almost like a palm with its spreading fronds. And look at those ribs. There are more than 30 that radiate from the central pier, and they rise delicately up until they reach a perpendicular rib. And at every intersection, there's this beautiful globe-like boss that is deeply undercut with a wide variety of types of foliage.
And in typically Gothic fashion, we see a very tall and wide clerestory, allowing a lot of light into this very small room and traceried windows.
The large arch over the doorway has emphasized its width, its thickness, through 3 courses of stone.
And the stone is varied because of the use of that darker Purbeck marble. So you have this sense of the alternation of light and dark as you look along the bottom arcade. And perhaps the most fun part of the chapter house is a row of faces right above the capitals of the arcade. And some art historians think these may be images of the men who attended the meetings here.
So whereas most of Wells is early English Gothic, with great experimentation and with revisions necessary in certain cases, such as the great Scissor arches, by the time we get to the building of the chapter house, because of its elegance, because of its refinement, and because of its extraordinary engineering, you really have a sense that these architects understood the principles of the Gothic.
It's incredible.
The chapter house was built as a meeting room.
It's beautiful.
But it is gloriously decorated, and it functions as a kind of microcosm of the synthesis of use and beauty that we find in the cathedral as a whole.
That was incredible. Thank you to the subscriber that suggested, actually checking out this cathedral. This actually ended up being a fantastic video, I think. I really enjoyed that because I think they covered about everything. Really excellent job by them. It looks like the speakers from this video, it has it down in the description, were Dr. Steven Zucker and Dr. Beth Harris. And they did a fantastic job. I wouldn't mind checking out some more of their videos after seeing this. That was totally up my alley. I really loved it. Gorgeous building. Like I said, I'm not a religious person, but man, do I enjoy checking out the architecture of some of these churches. Even here, there's been times where, I'll be out of town or something. I'm I wouldn't mind going to a service. I don't care what kind of church it is, just because I want to see the inside of the building. 'Cause there's some pretty ones. Not this old at all, but there's still some pretty ones around. But I really enjoyed that. I hope that you guys did as well. Like I said, I will put a link to this video in the description if you want to check it out yourself or any of their other videos. And yeah, thanks for watching with me, guys. Keep sending me your suggestions. I do always pay attention. May not always see them, but if I do and I can find a good video for it, I always like to take a look because you guys know more, obviously, about your country than I do. You know all the little sweet spots and the places that I've never even heard of. So, I rely on you guys to, let me know what you want to see and what you want me to look at, because it's about you guys as well. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for watching with me, and I hope you have an awesome day.